A serial killer from Castillo's past pops up in Miami, and Castillo teams up with a mysterious ally to stop him. Duty and Honor was directed by John Nicolella, whose name we've come across many times before, and was written by Martin Kupfer, who also wrote Bought and Paid For and Kill Shot. We open in 1972 Saigon, where a clean-shaven and ponytailed Castillo, then working for the DEA, teams up with a Vietnamese policeman named Trong to investigate the murder of a sex worker whose neck has been broken. Trong is played by Dr. Haing S, the Cambodian physician who escaped the brutal Khmer Rouge regime after being imprisoned and tortured for several years, and went on to win a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role in The Killing Fields. There's an unfathomably sad ending to his very dramatic life story. Less than 10 years after this episode aired, he was murdered in Los Angeles during a robbery attempt. In 1987 Miami, Vice investigates the murder of a sex worker with an identical MO to the Vietnam killing, down to the writing on the wall. Vice is involved with security preparations surrounding a forthcoming speech given by a noted communist named Juan Espinoza. They've been working closely with a security consultant named Jack Coleman, played by Brad Sullivan, but Castillo would like Vice to shift its focus to the sex worker murder instead. Back in Saigon, 6 women were ultimately murdered before the killer disappeared without a trace, and Castillo doesn't want this to be the start of another killing spree. We have a quick scene with Crockett on his boat with his new steady girlfriend, Dr. Teresa Lyons, played by Helena Bonham Carter, Oscar-nominated star of The Wings of the Dove and The King's Speech. I gotta say, the guest stars on this episode have impeccable pedigrees. We won't see much of Teresa here, but she'll take center stage next episode. Since the killer is likely a Vietnam veteran, Crockett and Tubbs visit the VA hospital to search for leads. While Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit plays, they get stonewalled by a physician who refuses to give them access either to the patients or to their case histories. Crockett and Tubbs find Inspector Trong prowling around the crime scene and take him in for questioning. Castillo reunites with his old friend, who reveals that there were another 6 murders by the same man in Thailand in 1973, in addition to the 6 killings in Saigon, confirming that Miami is just at the start of a killing spree. We meet the unnamed killer, who is played by Michael Wright, who is staying at a cheap hotel. He harasses the clerk, who is played by theater star Judith Malina, who co-founded New York's prestigious Living Theater with her husband, Julian Beck, whom we last saw playing the unfathomably powerful and corrupt banker in the Season 2 premiere Prodigal Son. The killer goes out and murders another sex worker while the Smithereens' Blood and Roses plays. That's a fantastic song. If you don't know it from this episode, you might know it from the 1986 film Dangerously Close, or from Rami and Michelle's high school reunion. Interpol files suggest the killer has worked in multiple countries over the years since Saigon, killing 6 women each time before disappearing. With Trong's help, Vice deduces that in each country, the killings were immediately followed by a political assassination of a prominent communist. Vice suspects the Miami killings are leading up to an assassination attempt on Juan Espinoza. Gina and Trudy work the streets undercover as sex workers. The killer approaches Gina, and acting on a suggestion from Crockett, she propositions him in Vietnamese. The killer panics and takes off. Crockett chases after him while Anything by The Damned plays, but the killer disappears, leaving behind a flaming car. Based on Gina's description, a manhunt begins for the killer. The hotel clerk recognizes the killer based on an artist's rendering. She phones in a tip to the police, but the killer murders her before Vice can talk to her. Crockett and Tubbs return to the VA hospital with a court order, and Crockett interviews a vet who knew of a vicious soldier known only as the Savage, who had a deep-seated hatred of women. Castillo meets with a CIA agent with whom he seems to have a long history, searching for intel on the Savage. Castillo's CIA connection tells him the Savage used to be a CIA asset, with Jack Coleman as his handler, but he was cut loose for being too unpredictable. Coleman is still operating as the Savage's handler on a less official basis, and he has ordered him to kill Espinoza. Castillo and Trong try to stop the assassination. The Savage stabs Castillo, but Trong manages to shoot and kill him. Trong then murders Coleman by casually hurling the Savage's knife into his chest before disappearing. Trudy reveals that the real Inspector Trong died in 1968. Castillo's friend is a mysterious imposter. Crockett and Tubbs visit a recuperating Castillo on the beach and deliver a note Trong left for him. In the note, Trong confesses that he was a North Vietnamese intelligence agent, but despite the deception, he considers Castillo his friend. An interesting thing about this final scene on the beach is that Castillo doesn't speak at all during it. Crockett and Tubbs both speak to him, but Castillo doesn't give a single verbal reply. It could be because of his injury, or it could just be one of those things we're going to have to file away in our ever-growing Castillo is Strange file. While I like Season 3 just fine, this is one of the relatively rare episodes this season that resonates with me in the same way that much of Seasons 1 and 2 did. The only other episode we've seen thus far this season that I would compare it to is Shadow in the Dark. I always feel like Miami Vice really hits its stride whenever it lets itself get a little weird, And episodes that center around Castillo are always, always weird. The little peek into Castillo's past here doesn't tell us anything new. We already knew he worked in Southeast Asia with the DEA, and it's not a big surprise to see him pop up in 1972 Saigon. His past doesn't seem as mysterious and exotic here as it did in Bushido and Golden Triangle, but as with everything regarding Castillo, it still hints at a bigger mystery that viewers will never be able to solve. Inspector Trong is one of those characters who fits seamlessly into the greater mythology of Miami Vice. Like Castillo, or like Jack Gretzky, the renegade CIA agent played by Dean Stockwell in Bushido, he's got a shadowy past that, even though we don't know many specific details about it, has clearly shaped his worldview to such an extent that he doesn't seem to exist in the same world as most people. Supernatural isn't quite the right word, but on occasion, Miami Vice will introduce these characters, some good, some evil, who have almost a mythical quality to them. And whenever these characters pop up, they really amp up the idea of the Miami of Miami Vice being a strange and dangerous place. Inspector Trong is one such character, and the unnamed killer, the Savage, is another, who almost seems like a boogeyman out of folklore, who will move from country to country, committing 6 ritual murders, followed by a political assassination before disappearing. So this is a good one for atmosphere, and I love the use of blood and roses, so I'm giving this one 4 flamingos. The next episode will be a showcase for Crockett's relationship with Helena Bonham Carter's Teresa. I hope you'll join me then. Have a great week.